everybody. Welcome to Improv FAQ at Length. This is a series of longer conversations about improv topics that have lots of questions surrounding them. I'm James Quesada.
And I'm Bob Wick.
And this is going to be a Q&A episode. We have been collecting questions from our community and from the greater improv community in general. And we were using those to answer, or we were using those questions for some of our episodes. And we thought that it'd be a fun idea to just have a whole kind of sub-series of Q&As where we answer those types of questions that people have submitted. So that's what this episode is going to be. And if you would like to submit questions for us to talk about and to answer, you can do that by emailing us at improvfaq@gmail.com, or you can find us on Facebook and Instagram. Give us a direct message. On YouTube, drop a suggestion in the comments, and we'll keep track of all that stuff and get around to answering your questions in these Q&A episodes.
And James, I love these episodes.
Me too.
Because if the premise of this whole show is a conversation at the bar, these are some of my moments at the bar. You know, I'm sitting there after the show or before the show, having my whiskey, and a student comes up and engages in a conversation about improv. Because this is a community-based art. So be in a position where I can share some knowledge or even learn something, because people really think out of the box sometimes. I love these kind of moments.
Yeah.
So
and
I'm excited for this.
I agree. And I think that, we want this to be a community resource, and what better way than to reach out to the community to send us questions so that we can answer them directly. Because, to the best of our ability, we're making a list of topics and frequently asked questions that are like the most frequently asked in a classroom or coaching and directing. But we're not going to be able to think of everything. And so we want to hear from you to make sure that we're not missing any questions that you have been thinking about or that are on your mind or come up. We want to get to those as well.
Plus, there's students who are at home now who have actually had a chance to read all those improv books that we suggested. There might be some new interesting things they want to discuss, you know?
What's going on with these theater sports?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, so this first one where we're specifically doing a Q&A, we're going to pull from our survey list, and our buddy Kurt B submitted quite a few questions, I think 6 or 7 questions. And we got around to answering one of them in a previous episode. But we're just going to keep making our way through the list. And so we thought we would back up a little bit and take care of the other questions that Kurt answered and make this a Kurt episode. Because it's also today while we're recording.
Birthday.
It's Kurt's birthday.
I totally stepped on that. I'm sorry. Happy birthday, Kurt.
Happy birthday. Happy belated, depending on when this gets released and when you see it. But we are recording it on your birthday. Okay, so what's on the list of Kurt's questions?
Okay.
That's really the segment, right? Is it Q&A or is it Kurt's questions?
It's Kurt's questions. So it's his birthday. We'll call it Kurt's questions this time. So I believe we answered this before, but I don't know if maybe something else will pop in your head. What are some of your most memorable notes that you have received, and how do they impact your performance style?
I think I covered everything that really stood out to me. Maybe the one last thing that I'll mention is that Matt Nas, who was my first teacher and first coach on a house team, the launch group at Go Comedy, not specific notes, but his way of incorporating history and all these forms and schools of thought. I think I mentioned in a previous episode that Matt was the person that stopped class, bringing up referencing books or Chicago improv, and the whole class was like, "Wait, what?" And he gave a whole breakdown of what's out there in the world of improv, and that really helped. Having somebody who did that to open my scope of what improv is really, really impacted me. So I'm thankful for that, although it's not necessarily a note.
No, that's a good note. And And Matt's great for notes. Actually, you know what? I'll talk about something I learned from Matt too, because I just love Matt.
Yeah.
One of the first opportunities I ever got to do like a written show, I had signed up for a master's class at the Planet Ant before they had like their curriculum that they have now. They used to do kind of like pop-up type class settings, and Nancy was teaching a master's class, and I thought it was just a master class in improv, but it was basically improvised to writing show. So for you would take her class for 8 weeks and then put up a show. And I didn't find out until day one that was the goal, because I'd never heard of such a thing, and I probably should have read.
Yeah.
But it was exciting. It was exciting because I never did any. I don't think I've ever did any written work like that before. I was just learning what long form was, and I learned a lot from. I got to play with some really incredible people. That's when I met D'Angelo, Katie, a bunch of other people I can't think of at the top right now. But Matt and D'Angelo were really cool about just talking to me and taking care of me, understanding that I was a new guy, and just being encouraging. Matt was even kind enough to like make sure like, I wasn't ignored during lunch or anything. Like he was like, "Hey man, you want to go and eat?" And he would just talk improv with me when we were in the car. One thing he said that really stuck out that I really appreciated was that when he first started long form and he got put onto the house team at the Inferno, he spent almost every weekend there performing. No matter what, if it was a jam or something, you just got to get out there and get stage time. And that really stuck with me. That someone who I thought was great at the time, who I still think is amazing, one of my favorite performers, one of my favorite showmen, just took the time to get comfortable on stage. And I didn't realize, I thought I was comfortable on stage, but until you get comfortable on stage and look back to where you were, it's almost night and day.
Yeah, sometimes you don't know until you grow. You don't know until you grow.
yeah, you don't know. Baby, you don't know till you grow. That sounds like a Matt line right there.
Yeah.
But he made me aware of it. So being aware of it, just having that, it was very comforting, because there was times I did get frustrated. I did have bad sets, or I did get mad at the person I was performing with because they couldn't read my script that I wrote in my head. Like, the petty things, the growing pains of becoming an improviser. So, just having that point of view from someone I respect was very helpful in forming how I perform now and just how I treat people. Because, thinking back how scary it is to get on stage the first time, I want to make sure when I see, like, if I'm doing a showdown and someone's first showdown, that I help them out.
Totally, yeah.
I do whatever I can to make this the best experience possible, because, your first time, you're always going to remember. I'm on stage. I realized, like, I was halfway through that sentence and I was like, oh,
it's a general
in the wrong
rule.
context.
Yeah.
Just in a general. Ladies and gentlemen.
But that's great.
You never forget your first.
Yeah. I love that story though. And okay, so is that going to do it for Kurt's first question?
Yeah. Because we did it.
Yeah.
Before. Kurt's second question: Why do you? Oh, okay. Why do you do improv?
Yeah, so this could be a really long and deep conversation, but I think just to put it simply, it's one, the medium that works best for me. I love not having costumes and props and relying mostly on imagination and to be able to have that freedom of anything can happen as long as you can, try to find creative ways to convey it just with your person on stage and with the people you're on stage with. I have a much more difficult time with. I've directed like a couple sketch shows or assistant directed, and the costuming and the props and the production and the lighting and all that stuff is like just not where my head goes. And so that's much more difficult for me to kind of like get excited about and to do well. Whereas with improv, I like the freedom and the imagination of it. And then secondly, the I think, broader thing that I'll say is that improv, I just think, is really valuable because it has so many transferable ideas to a positive lifestyle, and it's helped me grow as a person. And the learning curve is endless, in part because of that. And I find that when I am teaching or coaching, it's also a really rewarding experience to give that to other people. And I think that the more exposure that people get to improv and people who are improvising, I think it has this really positive ripple effect in the world. And it's a pretty powerful thing as an artistic medium. The principles that are in improv and the way that they can affect people's lifestyle and the way that we treat each other.
That's perfect. I want to steal your answer because you covered all the ground. I agree, man. I think it boils down to I enjoy the philosophy of creating by committee. I have written shows by myself, but not really. Honestly, I have not. I've written sketches by myself, but I've always wanted to have like a writing partner. I always like to have bounce ideas off because having someone else on stage or in the writing room pushes you a little bit farther, makes you think a little bit harder, but also their acceptance of your idea gives you strength. So yeah, it frees you up to do more interesting things. I love that. I love the challenge, but I also love the acceptance. So yeah, this is the perfect medium for me because I respect stand-up comedians and stuff like that, but I just don't want to be up there alone. I don't think that I would enjoy that, and I don't feel like it would be the same to me because when you do stand-up, most of the time you're doing prepared material, and I just don't enjoy doing that as much. I mean, I totally respect it because it is an art within itself, and it's hard as hell. So
yeah.
I'm not knocking it. It's just not my thing.
Yeah, I'm with you.
That's why improv.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay, next question. If you can go back in time and tell yourself 3 things about how to be an effective coach and how to be an effective instructor, what would they be?
That's a really good question. And
do you want to do one? I do one. You do one. I do one, and we get 3 out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So 3 between the 3 of us, or just 6 back and forth?
6 altogether. 3 apiece.
Gotcha. Okay. I think the first thing that comes to mind, or the first thing that comes to mind that I think would be helpful is, setting expectations is everything. I think whether it's a class, a workshop, just having things get off on the right foot is huge. And that comes down to things like setting boundaries of, there are going to be no fly zones, and we're going to keep it clean so that we're taking care of each other, and earn each other's trust to start playing in other more risque realms or edgy stuff. And it also comes down to the arc of what you're supposed to learn out of like the class. So what we're going to be doing is long form improv, or it's short form improv, or the workshop is about this. One of the specific things that I take to saying in workshops is that I try to skip names, like a lot of the time, just because I think introducing yourself for a one-off workshop is going to be tough. So I'll say something like, "Hey, I'm going to skip the introduction thing," which means it's that much more important to double down on the supportive nature of improv and make sure we're taking care of each other, and that we're trusting each other and behaving in a trustworthy way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Set the tone.
Yes. I think as an instructor and as a coach, something I had to learn because it was a bad habit is let the people in the room play more than talk. Gary talked about like the learning curve bell, but I think I was so excited. I love coaching. I love teaching. Absolutely. It's so rewarding. It's so much fun. And when you click with the class, it's so fantastic. It's it's almost, if not better sometimes, than actually performing.
Yep.
But I used to have a bad habit of almost giving lectures or TED Talks during my classes. And I don't know, like, how much information can you give someone in an hour and have them retain it all?
Yeah.
I had to learn, like, just give them bits and pieces and, try to tailor it to them the best you can, and really fine tune to the important stuff that they may have. Anybody who's ever had me for an instructor knows I don't like bad questions, because I think that's a habit people usually have at the beginning. And if I can just get them to do that, it's really helpful for their progression. So, just stick to the bigger things, and worry about the little things later, and let them play and make this as enjoyable as possible. It's not a lecture. It's supposed to be educational, yes, but it's also supposed to be a lot of fun, because people do it for different reasons,
Yeah.
So that's something I just had to focus upon.
Yeah, I agree. Let the people in the room play. And I also had that, and still do sometimes have that habit. So,
well, I think you and I get excited about philosophy. So, like,
Totally, yeah.
to me, like, hearing, like, we talked about how exciting it is for Matt to talk about improv. I get excitement out of that, but not everybody feels that way. Some people have been sitting in the office all day. The last thing they want to do is sit another 3 hours to hear some dude talk. They want to get up and, do some make 'em ups themselves. I get you.
Yeah. And you know what? Actually, that's gonna be my second piece of advice is give notes based on the purpose of the exercise, and ignore the rest. Like, unless it's something really, people are throwing chairs or breaking stuff, and you got to be like, safety first. When you're teaching and coaching and you're running an exercise, know what the purpose of the exercise is, and make sure that your notes are about meeting the challenge of that exercise, and that if there's other things that people are doing that are bad habits, you just flag them in your note, in your head as a note to give later, or keep track of, and make sure that you're just staying focused with your feedback.
Yeah, I like that. For my second bit of advice, I would say sit down and come up with your own philosophy, or understand the philosophy of the theater and put it into your own words. That way you have a filter or to give the notes through, like, hey, this is what we're working towards. This is the philosophy of the theater, almost, just so they know where it's coming from. And it can be helpful in times just to word things when you are giving notes. Like, hey, because sometimes you're giving a note and it could be either way, because this is an organic art. There really isn't any wrong way to do it.
Yeah.
But sometimes there are stronger choices. So just highlighting those and just saying, well, there's nothing wrong with what you did, or don't think I'm critiquing your content. It's just, hey, in this theater, this is kind of the way we do it. And if you can adopt some of that, or, just think about that, because I think a big mistake people make is getting too stuck in their philosophy where you're making carbon copies of yourself. I don't think that's necessarily the best. Like, we were talking to Izzo, and like, you should try to nurture how that person plays.
Yes.
But also, like, when you are giving notes, like, hey, let's just talk about this, just so you think about it when you are creating or discovering your comedic voice.
Yes. Yeah. I think is this about coaching, teaching, and directing?
It could be.
I'm going to make it that.
Coaching and teaching. Yeah, he said coaching and teaching, but I would put directing as part of the through responsibilities like someone at the theater would have. So,
this is what I'll offer up is that if insofar as you're in charge of attendance, the most important thing is to get everybody in the room for the first meeting. everybody who's going to be involved needs to be part of that first meeting if it's going to be as successful as possible of a project. I have noticed that it's very hard to do, but the few projects that I've been able to make that happen with have been the most successful projects that I've worked on. And if you're not able to get everybody in the same room for the first meeting or rehearsal, it doesn't mean that your project is doomed, but there's a pretty strong relationship between whether or not you're able to make that happen and whether or not the thing is going to be stable, consistent, and successful, depending on what your goals are with it.
Yeah, I like that. And it's true. It's true. People will show you inadvertently what their commitment is. So just, be mindful of it. I guess for my third one is none of us are getting paid to do this, not necessarily, or, like a living wage or anything. So make sure you pick projects. Don't say yes to everything, I guess would be my advice. Like, make sure if you do agree to coach that it's not personal, but there are just some groups who have, a goal that might intrigue you, might make you curious, might, I don't know, the reward's bigger, I guess. I can't think of a better way to put it. And make sure you're working with people who are committed, because there's nothing more frustrating than, okay, you're our coach, or you're their coach, and you show up on a Wednesday, and then you're sitting there for 10 minutes, because usually you should get there earlier to set the example and to open up the doors, and then you get a bunch of texts like, oh, we can't make it tonight, and then you have to cancel and then drive all the way back. So make sure you're working with people who's interested in their project, that you're interested in the project too, because at the end of the day, like, this should be fun. This should be, part of this is your hobby, or, something you want to do. So make sure you're picking projects and people and troops and situations that intrigue you, and that will give you momentum to become a better coach, director, teacher, and all that kind of stuff. Don't do it for the money, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Make sure you're doing what you're doing for the right reasons, and the people you're working with share the same reasons.
Passion. Yeah.
What's next on Kurt's questions?
My tablet turned off. I had to to get everything going. What are some of the cliches you see most often, and what make you stop doing them? That's a good one.
The cliches. So I'm guessing this is like in scenes, as opposed to like troop stuff. Or I guess we can have it open to anything. Does anything come to mind for you first?
Catchphrases, or like, I think for a second one, a popular one would be like, "Thanks, Obama," as satire to people who would say that. So those kind of catchphrases, or go-to lines to end a scene. Not that it was like an overabundance of that, but just stuff like that I don't find interesting because it's lazy improv.
Well, yeah, I agree with that. Is that like punchline driven stuff, devices that are punchline driven, and like one of them is that you do. Okay, we talked about Groupon before, right? Is that you're like, oh yeah, well I got the Groupon. It's like these little things that can hit. Is like, don't make that everything, because it'll lose its power. I remember like twerking was a thing. Like when it's just funny, these buzzwords and references, which I guess are not necessarily cliches, but it's just like it's the low hanging fruit of pop culture reference and the current events reference that I am thinking about it as, and challenging myself not to do that. I think is what I'm avoiding about the cliche. Is just like, don't just grab a reference from today's news and shove it into the scene for a quick nod from the audience.
Yeah, because then you're not doing a good scene. You're just parakeeting something you heard on extra or something.
Yeah.
I guess that kind of easy material or cliche stuff, to use your own words, Kurt, cliche stuff would be definitely something I try to avoid. It gets hard sometimes. Like if you're doing short form and you're doing something like sentences, it does pop up. So sometimes you're forced to do it, or
Yeah.
So, but try to avoid it. I guess my big one is walk-ons. I try to avoid walk-ons unless they're absolutely necessary, because I see a lot of that going on. I think you talked about that in New York, how it can be problematic. Because honestly, I think depending on who you're playing with, what kind of form you're doing, that if you're introducing something new rather than supporting something that already happened or supporting the scene, maybe using that initiation down the line and making it a callback to a scene that already happened is a lot stronger, and it will give it more legs, because then it gives the audience time to reset. So I don't know.
Yeah, and maybe in terms of walk-ons too, and cliches, is the waiter or server at a restaurant. As soon as people sit down, somebody jumps on to be the server, and we talked about it with Gary, that like you can do that just to like set the backdrop and just be like, oh, there would be a server, but you don't have to then steal focus in order to do it. And so it's not that I think that it's a bad device. It's just that people one, rush to do it. Like if you got two people sitting down and it's dinner, there's this bubble of tension as an audience member, or if I'm on the sidelines doing the show, where it's like, somebody's going to walk onto this fucking server and disrupt what they have before we even know what it is. What is it? Is it a date, a business meeting? Like, friends from college? Like,
if you do a walk on that comments on what just happened, oh, that was awkward. Here's your drinks. And then,
and then also the grandparent walk on. Oh, sorry, Bob, go ahead.
No. Because I would rather see you as a waiter sit a couple maybe adjacent to those people, and then have them help build the tension by being silent characters and maybe using nonverbal communication to comment on or heighten the tension rather than comment on the scene. But you were just about to talk about one of the most overused, and another favorite of mine, the crazy grandma. Yeah.
And especially, it's another one of those things where, like, if we have a quirky character and then we take them as in a tag to their home, and then they're with their spouse or siblings or parents or whatever, there's another one of those little bubbles of tension that comes up that makes me go, somebody's going to come on with a goddamn walker and be the craziest version of whatever is weird about the family. And I'm like, it's not always needed. What it is that, like, that's one way of heightening it. There are other ways of doing it as well, and that I would love to see explored more, and not just to go to, like, once the first domino falls, that grandma or grandpa is coming out of stage left by the third move. You know what I mean?
I mean, just in general, like the whole move of wait till so-and-so gets here. And then the move I hate is, oh, wait till mom gets here. And the mom shows up almost a split second after that happens. Like, well, there goes that tension. So let's talk about types of scenes, because for example, I try to avoid teaching scenes, whether it's I'm the teacher talking to a classroom, and unless we're doing like a day in the life or something, and the person that we interviewed happens to be a teacher, and it's just a location choice. But I try to avoid those because it can only end one way. Like if either you teach the person how to do the weird thing or you don't. So there's the stakes there doesn't really exist. The only exception is if you can input an emotional tag to why you're teaching. So you can either have a scene like, hey, son, let me show you how to throw a curveball.
Yeah.
Cool. Either the kid's going to do it or not. If you do a Billy Madison type golf swing, that's fantastic, cool, big choice. But you need more I don't know, more emotional stakes to it. So let me teach you the old Wick golf swing. You take a running start and you swing it. This is something my father taught me, and I'm so excited to teach you this. And I hope someday you'll teach my grandson this.
Totally.
So now you have this emotional thing. It's not about the golf swing. It's about today Dad wants to connect.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I also think about the everybody get in here scenes as a cliche that.
Yeah.
It's a pretty commonly used group game or group scene maneuver. And it's more common in New York, and it's one of those things that like I noticed and was like as a difference between what I'm used to and what's new, and then being like, why is everyone doing this? But I don't want to harp on it too much because it's a fine setup. It's just that like when you overuse it, it can become a crutch, and so I try to when that happens. I just try to immediately make a bold choice that makes it about the characters and not about talking heads going over funny things about some labeled scenario.
When I think of those scenes, if you ever watched The Muppets, they used to do this bit in almost every episode where they would do it was really jokey, but they would have a bunch of off-brand Muppets, so it wouldn't be like Kermit or anybody. It'd be like these weird characters. One would be the really tall monster, and they're all dressed up in either tuxedos or nice dresses, and they would just do jokes. I think Miss Piggy would be part of it too. Okay. And it's just like everybody's in there, and this is really a scene. This is almost like that show on Nickelodeon when the kids would pop out of the locker and just do a line. Hey James, what Allison? Blah blah blah. This blackouts, mini blackouts, but they all happen to take place in this presentation of a location. Yeah. So that's what it always feels like to me. But I agree. These are cliches, but I've seen them work as well and be very entertaining. So it's that thing. If you're gonna do it, and you have a cool new twist on it, that can be entertaining too. Because if I'm sitting next to James and someone does the old, oh, everybody come in here, and we roll our eyes, take a sip of the whiskey, and then they do something amazing, okay, that's a new approach. I didn't, So, if you're going to do it right.
Yeah. That's what a lot of the cliches come down to, right? Is that, it's a cliche mostly because of how it's done and the treatment of it. You got to really find your way to do it uniquely, and challenge yourself to avoid them.
Yeah.
What else? What else is on Kurt's list?
Okay, you gotta start up
shake it out of screensaver mode.
Gotta fire up Old Faithful. I could have just went into the options and kept it on longer. That's me. I like to say battery though. That's how I run my life. Advance on forming a troop and good troop hygiene, like attendance, members, notability, falling ahead or behind the rest, good bad practice habits.
Yeah. So advice on forming a troop. And just building good habits inside the troop, right? Good attendance, good cooperation. And Kurt's also asking about when troop members are excelling faster than others or kind of hanging back more than others. How do you handle different group growth rates amongst a group? So first thing I'll do is reiterate my thing from earlier, which is that whoever's responsible or kind of the captain of organizing the thing, getting everybody in the same room at the same time and setting those expectations is going to be the biggest advantage that you can give yourself to the long-term success of your troop. So, and what I think I'm emphasizing or want to be clear about is that it's not about forcing people to be there and drop their commitments and make sure that they're there on Tuesday. It's more that you should wait until you can get everybody in the same room. It's a balance too, because you don't want to just keep pushing it back indefinitely because nobody can be in the same room at the same time. But just wait until you can get everyone there. And if you're able to do that, then you can get people on the same page and come in and say things like exactly what this is that like attendance is going to be important, and this is really exciting, and let's make sure that we're having fun. And if people are growing at different rates, let's make sure that we're always staying connected with each other as people first, and then just being respectful of the different rates that people are going to want to do things at.
I would also say be careful about side coaching or being coach's assistant, because you may not see the growth, but the coach does. So if you do have an issue, your first step would be talking to the coach. And, if you need to get it off your chest, that's cool. That's what the coach is there for. But don't assume that just because you don't see growth isn't happening. And yes, people are going to grow or be better at different things than other artists. That tends to happen. And some people don't have the opportunity to grow as fast, so be mindful of that. But they still are capable of growth. But I do like the initial advice you gave, James, is like set an expectation, like and have everybody as a troupe help form what that expectation is. Because it's really hard to have someone adopt your expectation. If everybody's in the process of setting the bar, it's a lot more helpful because you can hold them more accountable to their own words than to your words. So start there, and then if you see them slacking, either check in with your coach or check in with them and see how it's going. And like, ideally, you guys are friends, so like, hey man, what's going on with you? Is work stressing you out? I know it's like you're not making it to practice because we all have an outside life too, and it might be something might be going on that you are not aware of because they don't want to bring that stuff into their circle. So maybe check in and check on them. Support doesn't just happen on stage; it should happen off stage as well. If that's not the case, have a troop meeting, ask the coach if he wants or she wants to be there. If not, maybe even just getting together as a group and like rehashing what you guys initially set out to do and checking in if that's a reasonable expectation or not. Because some people may have committed to weekly rehearsals and then something changed in their life, 3 months down the way, they might have gotten a new job or found out like their girlfriend or they're pregnant. Things happen. So, just because they can't live up to the commitment level they promised doesn't mean that they're not committed. So, I mean, these are all factors, and, and hopefully you have a coach who's going to hold you guys all accountable and point out things, and, maybe they should be able to help you reach that goal.
Yes, and I think that keeping things light and low pressure and easy on yourself inside the group is best, because if it is going to come down to different life events and different commitment levels or whatever it is, there's going to be stuff that's out of your control and shouldn't be your responsibility. If it's going to work really, really well, it's going to be easy. And so if it's not easy, you should keep it easy on yourself by just letting go of what's going on with other people and just making sure you're caring about them as people first, and then troop members if possible. And if there's any external pressure or motivation that is needed to keep the group glued together, then that's going to be a job for a coach, and make sure that you're putting that kind of stuff in the hands of somebody on the outside so that you all feel more unified together because you're getting the same stress from the same source.
And this is something that sometimes comes up. Some people need an out, because there's a friendship element to this. Some people won't quit a project even if they have to this usually happens with people who just started, their first troupe and stuff like that, and something comes up and they're afraid that either they're going to let everybody down and the opportunity will never come up again, or some other reason. Like, it's hard for them to let go. So even checking in and like, hey, you're fine. If you can't do this anymore, we totally understand, and there's not going to be an issue. We're not, we'll still work down the road when everything clears up. If it clears up, giving them an out. It can be very helpful and sometimes necessary, because they care. And that's being, again, going back. You're supposed to be supportive on and off stage.
Yeah, totally. Cool. Okay, we're coming to a cap on our time here. So, how many more questions we got on Kurt's list?
What are some of your favorite? Well, there are two questions, but I think they can be combined. Okay. What are some of your favorite and least favorite warm-ups, and why? What's your pre-show routine? So what's your favorite pre-show routine, and what are some of your favorite warm-ups and your not favorite warm-ups?
Yes. So I think
favorite warm-ups.
Yeah, I like to stretch. I like to just make sure that I get my body, my blood flowing a little bit and loosen up. I also, I think I mentioned in a previous episode that I like to get there early. That's really my warm up, is like get there early and settled into the space if I can, and just relax. If I'm not familiar with the venue, I get to check it out. If I am familiar with the venue, I get to just be chilling for a minute and settle in. That's pre-show for me. I'll hang on to warm-ups. What about you, Bob?
I put warm-ups in two categories. One's for you, one's for the group. And I don't think there's a bad one if it works for either one of those occasions. So, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of eights, but I've had fun doing it, so I'm not anti-eights. It doesn't warm me up, but sometimes it can be silly and just something to shake your yayas out. So I'm not mad at that. But other than that, if it works, if a warm-up works for you, do it. Sometimes when you're warming up with the group, it's not about you. If it helps someone else warm up, that's fine. Participate, because, again, supportive on and off stage. I over-explained my pre-show routine when we had a discussion with Nicole. I don't.
Yeah.
It's a big one. We don't have enough time for it. So if you want to hear about that one, Kurt, happy birthday. Go find a Nicole episode. It should be.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree on the point of just being willing, and there's no such thing as a bad warm-up as long as it's helping somebody. Even Miles Stroth, who will talk about hating the Herald or hating group games. Not hating the Herald, but he's just done it for so long or had so much experience with that he's over it. And same group games in particular, he's I don't like it, but and he's I also hate warming up, but if it's going to help somebody else, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it with sincerity, no question. So I think you'll find that even people who are opposed to or don't love doing warm-ups, the people that are setting a good example are the ones who are going to be willing to do them nonetheless and do them full-heartedly. Yeah,
because I've been in troops where it's absolutely necessary, where we warm up together for a good show. And then I've been part of troops I don't think you, Gary, and I used to warm up together, but we all had our thing. And then because our play was so natural that, we didn't really need to warm up. We just needed to be warmed up when we got up on stage. So it really, it's a great question, but honestly, there's no definitive answer because it really depends on the person. And I hate giving that kind of answer it depends, but it kind of does. It kind of does. It depends on the circumstances, the troupe and the performers within the troupe and yourself.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I so that's everything on Kurt's list.
That is Kurt's list. It's his birthday list.
And that has been Kurt's questions.
Hey.
Awesome. Well, I am very happy that we got through that list because it is a list of really great questions. And so Happy birthday, Kurt.
Happy birthday.
and I hope that you got some valuable stuff out of that. And if not, keep asking questions.
Yeah. Follow-up. Episode 2, Kurt's follow-up questions.
and a reminder that if you would like to add to the list of questions, we're going to keep making our way through the ones that we initially got from the group that we reached out to before we started this series. But if you would like to add to the list once we get to things beyond our first list, send us your questions at improvfaq@gmail.com. Or send us a direct message on Facebook or Instagram, where we are also at Improv FAQ. And I wish YouTube had more of a direct messaging thing.
Right.
You can always, if you're perusing through the YouTube channel and you're watching anything and a question comes to mind, we keep track of the comments too. So just drop a comment in there with a suggestion if that's the best way for you to do it. Great.
Also, let's keep these conversations going. You've heard me and James' side of things. If you have a comment, that's not a question. If you just want to keep the discussion going, treat it like a forum. Like this is a conversation at the bar. Everybody's welcome. Let's circle up. Let's talk. Because I miss that so much. I want this to keep on going. And thank you guys so much for participating, sending your questions. Everybody was super quick, and I really appreciate I think I can speak for James. We really appreciate the support. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks to Kurt, and thanks to anybody who has submitted a question so far. We'll be getting to yours next. And we'll catch you next time on Improv FAQ at length.
Bye.
Bye.